Good evening. On behalf of the Chicago Public Library, the University of Chicago Laboratory Schools, and the Zena Sutherland Committee, I'm pleased to welcome you to the 2022 Zena Sutherland Lecture. My name is Shelley Hughes, and I am the Director of Children's Services and Family Engagement here at the Chicago Public Library. In a typical year, I'd be greeting you in person from our flagship Harold Washington Library Center in Chicago's Loop. But once again, we're living in an atypical year. But while I'm sure we all long for the day when we can be together safely in person, I'm also pleased that we're able to present tonight's lecture to you wherever you are in the world. A few notes about our virtual format. Tonight's lecture will be recorded and it will be available for viewing after the presentation on the Chicago Public Library's YouTube channel. It will also, as always, be published in its entirety in the Horn Book. We will be hosting a question and answer session after tonight's lecture. So if you have questions, feel free to type them into the Q&A section of the chat. If you look at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little button that says Q&A, and we can share those questions at the end. And now I'd like to invite you to hear about Zena Sutherland, for whom this lecture is named, as remembered by Roger Sutton, who served as the editor-in-chief of the Horn Book from 1996 to 2021. Roger recorded this remembrance last year, and it remains a touching tribute to the work and legacy of Zena Sutherland.
Welcome to the 2021 Zena Sutherland Lecture. I'm Roger Sutton, Editor-in-Chief of the Horn Book and a longtime member of the Sutherland Lecture Committee, and that's Brownie. Because tonight's lecture is coming to you via Zoom, our audience is much larger and much broader than what we usually get for this event, which has been taking place live in Chicago on the first Friday and Monday since 1983, except last year when the lecture was in hiding along with everything else. So we thought we should tell you a bit about this lecture series and the remarkable professor in whose name and honor it was created. Many of the librarians and teachers in the audience tonight would be able to tell you about the one professor who pointed them toward a career bringing children and books together, who in fact is the reason they are here tonight. For me and for any number of other librarians, including Carla Hayden, the current Librarian of Congress, that professor was Zena Sutherland, who taught children's and young adult literature at the University of Chicago's Graduate Library School from 1972 until her retirement in 1986. She served even longer as editor of the Bulletin of the Center for Children's Books, assuming that position in the late 1950s. Now, I don't know what you civilians think happens in a children's literature class, but try to picture a tiny blonde woman in a psychedelic shift dress, chain-smoking Carltons, while an entire room of grad students hung on her every word. She used her own textbook, Children and Books, which she had taken over from Grande Dame Mayhill Arbuthnot, but that comprehensive book was just the structure on which Zena built a bravura performance that was one part wisdom, one part common sense, and one part stand-up, along with a running commentary that contained some of the juiciest gossip in the children's book business, all delivered in a whiskey contralto. She was also patient and kind and helpful with her students, who imbibed Zena's unsentimental approach to bringing children and books together, and her openness to the great changes that were happening in books for young people in the 1960s and 70s. Zena's students, and in subsequent years, their students, spread the Zena gospel far and wide. As Zena's retirement approached, two of her doctoral students, Marilyn Kay and Betsy Hearn, who would succeed Zena in 1985, planned a surprise. Secretly, they had solicited and edited essays from just about everybody who was anybody in children's books at the time. Ursula Nordstrom, Susan Cooper, Virginia Hamilton, Lloyd Alexander, Arnold Lobel, and more, and put them all in a book complete with a cover by Zena's great pal, Maurice Sendak. That book, celebrating children's books, Essays on Children's Literature in honor of Zena Sutherland, was published in 1981 by Lothrop Lee and Shepard, and all of its proceeds were donated by the publisher, contributors, and Marilyn and Betsy to establish the Zena Sutherland Lecture. The first lecture was given in 1981 by Sendak. Subsequent lecturers include Trina Shart-Hyman, Walter Dean Myers, Lois Lowry, Jacqueline Woodson, Richard Peck, Linda Sue Park, and most recently, Jean Lewin Yang in 2019. So you see that Jason Reynolds has some big shoes to fill. Zena died in 2002, but we are happy to continue this lectureship series in her honor. On behalf of the Sutherland Lectureship Committee, I would like to thank Betsy and Marilyn for getting this going, the University of Chicago, the Chicago Public Library, and the Hornbook for their steadfast support, our faithful audience for coming back year after year, the publishers who helped make each lecture evening possible, and the 38 authors and illustrators who have given us so much insight into not only their own craft, but into the value young people's literature brings to our culture as a whole. Militant atheist Zena will probably get me for saying this, but I hope she is up there smiling. Thank you.
Hi, everybody, and thank you, Roger and Shelley. My name is Elisa Gall. I'm a librarian at the University of Chicago Lab Schools, and I'm a member of the Sutherland Lectureship Committee. I'm so grateful to be connected with you all here this evening for the 2022 Zena Sutherland Lecture with guest Yuyi Morales. I suspect many of us remember the first time we read something made by Yuyi Morales. Our experiences are all different and special, but there is a shared pattern of eyes opening wide, hearts filling with feeling, and brains exploding with wonder and curiosity. Yuyi Morales has won countless awards, among them several Pura Belpré medals and honors, the Caldecott Honor, the Jane Addams Award, the Golden Kite Award, and more. But of all these accolades, what stands out to me as a children's librarian is the delight and appreciation that I see young readers find when they get to experience something Yuyi created for them. On top of being an artist and an author of children's books, Yuyi has contributed her voice to conversations and activism around diversity, equity, and justice in the children's literature world and the wider world too, of course. Through these reflections, shared in lectures and essays, she has consistently modeled honesty, openness, vulnerability, and care. I know I personally have learned so much from Yuyi's entire body of work, and I know I'm not the only one. So with no further ado, it is an honor to welcome our 39th annual Sutherland lecturer, Yuyi Morales.
Wow. Hi, Elisa. Thank you so much for that introduction of me, and hi, everybody. I'm welcoming you here in my space where I work, where I create, where I live. And I'm very honored and very excited to have this opportunity to give the Zena Sutherland lecture tonight, because I know this is an opportunity to have our voices heard, even though I know I am the one who is going to be speaking more than anybody. But I hope that we can have a dialogue of the sorts, maybe also when we have some questions and answers, because I know that it's not so easy sometimes to have an opportunity to make our voices heard. And sometimes it even requires like some craziness and some bravery. And today I'm gonna do something that feels brave to me, because I still have, like many of us, that feeling that if you are not very good at doing something, you shouldn't try it. And it's something that I'm trying to break for me, because it doesn't help me to live better. It doesn't help me to live creatively. So today I thought that we could use my jarana. My jarana is this instrument that comes from where I am from, which is here in Veracruz. Is used to play folk music. And I thought that to begin with, so that our voices can come out, we can sing a song about asking the universe, asking the things, the tools that we have, our own body, mi jarana, in this case, my jaranita, to help me bring the voice out. So I'm gonna start tonight with this that feels kind of like an asking for permission to have our voice projected tonight. Jaranita, jaranita, help me sing this song. Jaranita, jaranita, help me sing this song. So that my voice can be heard. So that your voice can be heard. So that our voices can be heard, and our voices will get where they must go. To the heart of my friend, al corazón de mi amiga, to the heart of this fire, al corazón, al corazón. To the heart of my siblings, to the heart of my hermanes, to the heart of our fire, al corazón, al corazón. And after asking for permission to bring my voice to you, well, I want to start. I'm going to share my screen actually, because my voice, like the voice of most everybody, is made of many different ways of saying things. And I like to say things with my voice, with my jaranita, but I also like to say things with images. I sometimes even like to say things with silence. This time I'm gonna use my voice, some words and some images, and I'm gonna start here. And I hope that you accompany me patiently, because this is a moment in where we gather here just like the friends, like the people, like the collective, like the community that we are. I hope that you feel comfortable here, because we are in a place, in a safe place, where we can bring our voice out and we can even make mistakes. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about the journey of my voice through books and words and images. And I was born in Mexico, like many of you know. And when I grew up in Mexico, I always knew from school and everything that I was an American. I was an American because I was born in the American continent. And when I arrived to the United States many years later, I was always surprised to hear that people call America to the United States. And I was very surprised because I have never heard that before. For me, America has always been the whole continent. So when someone asked me if I was an American, I always said, yes, I am an American. One of the things that I started doing as I realized how the term was used in the United States was to kind of resist it, because it is very easy to feel like they are taking something away from you when they tell you that you are not an American because you were born in a place like Mexico. And that's not the case for me. So I began calling the United States the United States. You will probably always hear me call the land where Chicago right now and all of you are at, you will hear me calling it the United States, because I always knew that the United States was just one part of America. But later on, I also learned that America is a word, a name that was given to the continent after the Europeans came and conquered the entire continent. So, because I know how words have power, and how the use of our words help us give names to the vision that we have of the place where we live, of this world. Well, I decided to adopt a new term that is not something that I have come up with. It's something that I have learned from other people. And so I know now that I come from this place called the Abya Yala, which is in the Guna language, which is an indigenous language, means land on its full maturity. And this is a name that was agreed for the American continent at the Summit of Indigenous Peoples and the Nationalities of the Abya Yala. So it is new for me, but I'm starting to get accustomed to use words to name a new reality. As you might have, some of you might have already seen part of my story about my journey through books and dreamers. I was someone who loved to draw since I was a little kid. Those drawings that you see in Dreamers are actually my drawings that I made as sometimes as I was next to my mother's sewing machine, and she would bring me paper and pencils so that I will not get bored as she was making work in her sewing machine. And when I was growing up in Mexico, I didn't have books. What we had were things like this. They were magazines, they were comic books. I admire so much the artwork that I saw in some of those magazines that weren't necessarily for children, but that showed me that if you were an artist, you could create things like the ones I saw at these magazines, and I admired them so much. They were my literature, and I still have a very deep connection with comic books because they were part of my childhood. They were my books. Eventually, when I was in middle school, this book came to me, which is La Increíble y Triste Historia de la Cándida Heréndira y su Abuela Desalmada, which is a book by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. And to me, this book opened up this image of myself, of someone who was a reader, which I didn't have before. Just like in Dreamers, one day I put things in a backpack, and with my child and my soon-to-be husband, we crossed a bridge and arrived into what will become my new home, the United States. And there, as an immigrant, I experienced the things that many immigrants experience, which, especially if you don't know the language, might be confusion, might be sadness, might be loneliness. Until one day I arrived to a place that I have never seen before. And there a new world opened up to me, because before that, I told you, I have not seen pictures or books made for children, but at the library, my first surprise was that there was a body of work made, beautiful work, these books made especially for children. My second surprise was that not many, but some of these books were made by and for people like me. They were made by people who were my same skin color. Perhaps they spoke Spanish, or they were immigrants like me. There were only a few of those books, but it gave me this sense that we all have things to say, that we all have stories. And I wanted to have those books being the place where I could put my voice. I started learning how to make these books because I wanted to tell the stories. One of the gifts that the library gave me, the biggest of the gifts that the library gave me, was the realization that we all have things to say and that we all have stories. And that because we all have voice, we all have different ways. Our voice takes different forms so that we can tell those stories. And that the stories that we carry with us, they are all connected. To me, that was like fire in my heart. How stirring, how joyful, how moving, how inspiring to realize that there is not one single story, that there is a universe of stories. And some of those stories were at the library. Some of those stories were inside of me too. And they were inside of everybody, actually, all the people that are here, all the people that inhabit this world, we all have stories. I love the work of Marilisa Jimenez Garcia because she is always also inspiring me. She talks about how those stories that are everywhere are not only happening in books, they are happening right now as we speak, as we live, and we all hold them. So the thing that we can do is start unlocking those narratives that are all around us. At some point, almost 22 years ago, I started unlocking those narratives that I had with me, those that I had brought from Mexico, where I was born, where I grew up, and some of the narratives that were weaving with the stories and the experiences that I was living as I was an immigrant in the United States. And I began trying to tell those stories in the format of the book, as I have seen at the libraries. And I realized also that I was making books part of my life. So now I've come with this idea that perhaps I am someone who carries books. I carry books in my heart, in my hands as I am making them. I carry them when I read them to children or readers, or when I share them, or when I bring them as gifts. I am a book bearer, and so are you. You are, whether you create or you read them or you bring them or you carry them with you or you share them or you memorize them or you live and love books, you are a book bearer. Eres un cargador o una cargadora de libros. Book bearers, I will say, are us who see books as a way to learn and unlearn how to inhabit this world. And there are many of us, lots of us. And most of the time, and luckily, we find each other. We find each other in the street. We find each other at conferences. We find each other at libraries. And we have our work. We are making something that we love. But when I started making books, I realized that the reasons and the stories that I was unlocking had been changing. And nowadays, I question myself a lot. Why and how and when and what and who are the characters and the stories that I'm going to be portraying, and what those stories are going to do to take me into a journey of understanding also, and to transforming the world that we live in. So I have this quote here, which always pulls me. If children's literature and the criticism of children's literature take upon themselves to decolonize the world, they will prove the most effective post-colonial project in the long run, for the world ultimately belongs to children. Many of our children, the children in the United States, the children in the whole continent, and the whole American continent are our children, the children of our world. And in the place where I come from, in Mexico, we do have a colonizing history. While the United States don't have a colonizing history, you have, and we have there, a settlers history. And that is part of our reality. And that is part of how also how we approach our stories and how we approach to our work. We are making books for children. Sometimes we make them for the children that we were or the children that we still are. But ultimately, the books that we are publishing, the books that we are sharing, the books that are at libraries, at bookstores, the books that is at the shelf that you're going to read to your child tonight, is a book that was created for una infancia, for a niño or niña or niñe. And I've been making these books now for a long time, and I would think that maybe now it will be getting easier, and I'm sorry to tell you that it's not. It is not getting easy. It's not getting easier. One of the things that books have given me is also a lot of questions, and I take that as a gift. I am grateful for the questions that my work brings me. Like my friend, Lía, la novia sirena. She says, pero qué bonito es dudar de una misma. But how beautiful is to doubt oneself. Because doubting opens the door for us to go out and search, to be researchers, to find those things that we don't know. When we doubt, then finally we move and we go out and we look. My books are always pulled by questions. But even more and more as I grow older, as I have more books, my questions are becoming a little harder to answer sometimes. And what I realize is that I've been making books alone for a long time, and not truly alone, but in a way in where I envision myself as this person that I am all by myself on my desk. And one of the things that I realize is that that's a very simple way to make books. What happens when we open up, when we start our journey of making books and we are not alone, where we look and we look for the things that we cannot see and start our journey. Here I'm sharing with you some images of my journey for making my latest book, which is Bright Star in English, Lucero en Español. Because I was making a book about the borderlands, the place where Mexico and the United States meet. I decided to go there and start researching and investigating and also talking to people. And I learned things. I learned things I didn't know. I realized that the borderlands are a place where life thrives, even though we might not see it, where there might be water, where also there might be fences and walls. Those fences and walls, yes, they are put in place to stop people from attempting to cross into the United States, which usually they don't stop anybody. What they do is stop our animals, our plants, and they destroy our environment. What they also do is they don't stop people, but they push people to go and look for places where they can cross that are usually even more dangerous, and they risk their lives. As I was researching and talking to people in order to make this book, I was finally able to put a story together, a story of life, of animals, of people, of plants who are in our hearts, because it's the planet where we live, and it is the planet that lights our hearts. It is our home. But well, not always this place is being taken care of the way that it should, and especially those younger creatures, including humans, animals, and everything alive can be in danger of having to stop their journey for looking for the things that they need to survive. To make this book, of course, I couldn't make it alone. And I was trying to learn also new ways of making my books. I've been making books for many years, and I've learned many things that have to do with crafts. They have to do with how I made my illustrations and using different techniques or different materials. But one of the things that I am on learning and learning again is how can I connect to the stories that are around me so that I can tell stories that will help me transform and will help us all transform this work. And what I know now is that we can never do it by ourselves. We always have to go and connect with other people. One of the people that I talked to was Sergio Avila, my friend. And Sergio took me through the Sonoran Desert, and he's an expert of the desert, and he showed me many things. And as he was taking me to a place by the river, I was asking questions again. The question that I had for making the book Bright Star was, when something really, really hurtful happens to you, when something irreparable happens to you, how do you heal? How do you repair that? If something happens to a child, how can we ever expect that a child is going to be able to restore herself, to restore himself, to restore themselves and be wholesome and happy and productive again? And I was asking this question wherever I went. And one day, as that same day we were there by the river, after we talked for a while, Sergio told me, Yuyi, you know what? I'm going to tell you something. You are never going to find the answer for your question, because there is no one answer for that question. The answer is that we go on. The answer is that we sit here and we talk. The answer is that we get up, eventually we go on and we eat and we go to the bathroom and we sleep and we go to school and we go to work and we continue living. And through our living and through our going and our journeys, we continue finding the different actions that bring the answers to questions like the ones that I have to any question. So how is steering to realize that there is no one single solution or answer to our question? That really makes me excited to realize that there is a universe of answers. And because questions are something very valuable, especially when we are book bearers, when we are making, sharing, living books, I wanted to offer you a few questions. So what questions can we ask ourselves about our work? If we are working with children, if we are working with books. And here are some that I'm still asking myself, and I just want to share them with you. Are we making books that support the idea that the world is made for those and only for those who can generate wealth? Sometimes questions are hard because we have to look really deep inside, because we might have to see something that we adore, which is our work and our stories, and we have to look at them with a different eye, with a critical eye, and question ourselves if perhaps our characters in the stories that we are writing or sharing, we are asking them to model how to do better, or to be deserving or obedient in order to experience a successful outcome. Are we making books that value intelligence and civilized behavior? And maybe we didn't think about it before. I know that I didn't think that when I was asking in a book for a child to be intelligent, that I was asking a question, that I was asking to him or to her or to them to transform into something that I believe is like to be intelligent, or what I believe is to have civilized behavior. To our stories and those working tirelessly, tirelessly. I know, because I know that that has been a part of my philosophy of life, like showing myself and the world, especially people like us who are immigrants, that we have to show the world that we are so hard workers. We will not even take care of ourselves because we are giving everything to be seen as people of value. Do our stories suggest that people are of more value if they work harder? And do our stories champion the idea of doing things bigger, faster, quicker, better than others and other forms of competition? Are we creating books that reproduce beliefs and prejudice inherited from a violent culture? Do our books reinforce the idea that punishment brings learning? Does our work advocate only for individuals or close relationship well-being only for those who are close to us, for our family, for those that we love, for those that look like us, for those that think like us? Does our work support the idea that adults know better than children? And that's a hard one. That's a hard one because I know that with good intentions, sometimes we might not realize that our stories and what we express in our work might be telling children that we have the answers, that we know better than them, and that they should grow and be more like us, and that we are expecting them to be more like us. We have to be careful with that. Does our work promote the idea of normal, that there is one thing to be normal, one way of being normal, and everything else is something that is not valued, it's something that is at the edge or even outside of the edge? With the privilege that we have, because I'm a published author, because you might be a bookseller, a publisher, a librarian, an educator, a book promoter, or simply because we are adults. Well, let's ask ourselves, with those privileges that we have, how can we support and open the space for the voices that are usually ignored? And Brigitte Basayo, who is a feminist, she says, let's really start building something different. How can we start building something different with our work? We are going to have to learn from each other. That's something that we all by ourselves is going to be really difficult. In the last few years, I've been valuing how rich is the learning that I get from other people, from collectives, from communities, and also from other women. I've been learning to create in community, something that I have never done well before. And I've been marveled by the results. From these collectives, from learning from other people and working with other people, well, now I'm excited and stirred by realizing that there is no one single voice, that there is a universe of voices. So if we could hear the many, many voices out there, that sometimes we ignore them, but if we could bring them into our work, how could we deconstruct that work and then create something different? Well, I'm going to offer you some ideas, and I would love you to offer me some too. Here are some of mine, some things that I learned. We can begin asking questions from genuine curiosity. It will be so exciting to know that now I know something about you, about all of you that I didn't know before. We can start making things that make us happy, even if they don't turn out right. So that we don't do only those things that we are going to be successful, that we are going to be good at, but that we do the things that we love. We can read and know stories different from the ones that we have always heard. Well, we can also listen to those complaints about us that make us feel uncomfortable. That is hard. and examine how they are related to our actions. This is very difficult, especially if you are an author. That has happened to us. It is happening to us, and it will happen to us constantly. Our work is out there, and our work is public. I mean, like, there is a lot of people who will read it, and there are going to be a lot of responses and to our work, and some of them are hard to hear. But I wonder what will happen if we could listen to that criticism or the complaints that we have, and we could use them to grow. I know it is not easy, and if you have some experience with that and some advice for all of us, I would love to hear it. I'm still learning about it. And what about nurturing connections with people with whom we can make mistakes, so that they hold the space for us, for learning and for reparations? Getting together with other people that we can grow up with is one of the most beautiful things that can happen. Also, breaking binary thinking and embracing plurality instead, so that our choices and our possibilities are infinite. There is no just good and bad. There is not just black and white, and there is not just she or he, but there is an universe of possibilities, because we are that universe of possibilities. And the more that we reflect that plurality, the more that we are reflecting the real world. And what about building community and spreading radical trust? That is a hard one. To trust someone that you don't know, and to give and receive trust to someone that you just met. But if we can have that agreement that we can love and respect anybody just as much as we love and respect those that we had known for a long time, if we could give that to anybody around us, we will be practicing radical trust. And I think that our community will flourish. Finding or creating celebratory words or new words to name things that are not part of the norm. And here I want to make also a pause, because in Espanol, in Spanish, we do have ways of using the language that is either masculine or feminine, for example. And the use of inclusive non-binary language, well, it is difficult in the English language. It is even more difficult in the Spanish language. And I know that I have encountered resistance, especially by people, even people here in Mexico, or people who speak Spanish, about the use of the inclusive language. A lot of people might say, like, why are we going to change something that we have always used? And why cannot you respect the fact that I don't want to name the difference? I don't want to name those who have always been invisible to me. I want to keep seeing just two sides of everything. And it is not easy, especially when you have had so many years like me speaking in a language that is not inclusive. And I am now practicing in every day, trying to remember and use inclusive language, especialmente en español. And I hope that you are all patient with me, but also that you hold me accountable when I forget, and that you hold my mistakes if you can, so that I can continue growing. Something else that we can do is break mandates, rules, hierarchies, and practicing horizontal connections, so that we are all on the same constellation and we are all shining together. And yes, remembering and celebrating that we are always in process. So does that mean that we are going to have to revolutionize ourselves too? Not only our work, but that we have to change the way that we live, the way that we wake up every day, the way that we speak, the way that we make our stories? I will say yes, 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 yes. And I'm glad that we have this opportunity in this lifetime to make changes, to live lives different from the ones that were given to us, lives and ways of living that we can build, that we can choose. So here are some words to help book bearers imagine, name, and revolutionize our vision of the world. These words are not told by me. These are told by other book bearers, and I want to offer them here to you. Sybil Duran and Marilisa Jimenez Garcia. We scholars and teachers of youth literature also need more books that can serve as windows for youth of color to envision their identities and experiences in nurturing, restorative ways. We need celebratory narratives that acknowledge a colonial history, but view it as a source of strength that can help readers imagine new possibilities for a diverse society. Carla España and Luz Yadira Herrera. Passively accepting the status quo of any culture or simply substituting one myth for another contradicts its basic assumptions because no group is inherently superior or more heroic than any other. Sandra Shiniko-Batz. Nationalism seeks to homogenize differences to position the so-called civilized, the intelligent, those who work harder, the ones more capable to generate riches, while everyone else will support the structure. Aura Cummins, violence has been invented to kill those whose humanity is put in doubt. Debbie Reese, a story idea sounds good, but writers and editors absolutely must stop and think about readers. Patricia Enciso, please consider the value and challenges of writing and reading those stories that seriously engage with deep cultural differences, not as adornment or foil, but as the story we have longed to read about our place in the American hotbescape. And I will say the United States hotbescape, or the American, because then we include everybody in the continent. Edith Campbell. We need workers who honor the past while creating a new future. We are not looking for missionaries to represent our interests. I'd say forget patience. We've been patient too long. Look back and fly forward. So Maya Daoud, if you think your platform or voice or space is big enough that it can make a difference, then it is absolutely necessary to consider tuning it over, however temporarily, to someone from the community you want to speak for. And of course, here we are. When we fight for diverse books, we are really just fighting for a most honest literature, books that tell the truth, because when we say we need diverse books, we are really saying we need books that don't lie to us about who we are or whether we exist. And I realized I didn't put his name here, and now I'm blanking out, but his name will come soon. Maybe you are here listening. And so we create, and we will be creating. Let's create something together. Let's create a safe space where children can recognize the wonders of one another, and where they can imagine, propose, and contribute to building joyful ways of inhabiting this world, surprising ways of inhabiting this world, dignified ways of inhabiting this world, caring ways of inhabiting this world. And I would love to hear a word that you can insert here, so that when we create, and we create our books, and we create a space where children can read these books, we are making a safe space for them to be exactly who they are, not to ask them to be something different, but a place where they are safe, where they are fed, where they are cared for, where they are respected, where they are loved, and they can finally just have the opportunity to be the protagonists of their own stories and decide how they are going to create the world where they want to live in. So after all these years of making books, and now, well, I don't have that many books like those. I think some of us might have those books. Are things easier now? Well, not for me. And I would like this quote of Joy Hargrove that says, if it is going too easy, you might wonder, am I going deep enough? I will say, if we want to go deep enough, it is worth making of every book, whether you share it, read it, love it, make it, draw it, write it. Make of every book a journey of transformation. Because how exciting and stirring to realize that there is no one single book. Even if it has won all the awards in the world and there is a sticker that says this is the best book in the world. Let's remember that there is a universe of books, and that every book, for every book that has a sticker out there, for every book that has made it into the library or into the shelves of the public library or the store or your school, that there are many, many books that are supporting those stories, that the true richness happens in the many books that are being created and shared right now, and how unimaginable that is. So I wanna finish this just inviting you and offering you the possibility of us creating together, creating art to heal, books to grow, and stories to transform. With this, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I think that we can have a dialogue now.
All right. Judy, that was wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you for your music, your images, your questions, your wisdom. Words have power, yes. Our world belongs to children. Do we go deep enough? So my name is Ann Carlson. I'm a member of the committee. And I want to, and it's so great to see you. I have a few questions that readers, participants have written in to me to ask you. And so I'm going to start with one of the first ones. Tell us about your early childhood experiences with folklore. What are your favorite memories of Mexican stories?
Well, my family, they are storytellers, but I never heard stories like the folk tales necessarily. Some of those were in our textbooks at school. But the stories that I heard from my family, my uncles, tios, abuelas, parents, mother, were stories that they called real life. And that's what I think that a book like Gabriel Garcia Marquez had became such a strong book for me when I saw it for the first time, because even though here in the United States, especially, people like to call the work that Gabriel Garcia Marquez does as magical realism. To me, it was always just realism, because in my life, in my family, stories that were rather fantastical were told always as real life stories. And so those were the things that my mom or my dad or my uncles and aunts will tell us about. They will tell us about the existence of little people called chaneques that sometimes lost people. How some of them as children, they were lost and then they were returned home after being at the forest with little people, or the stories of how one of the stories that my mom tell me that her own mother used to tell her is that when she was pregnant, one day she heard one of her children cry and the baby was still inside her womb. And those stories are been circulating in our family, in our community for a long time. And, you know, my mother was always skeptical. She was the only person in her family who went to school and studied until now. She's still studying things. And she always say, well, you know, those are stories. They are only stories, and there are explanations for those stories. And yet, those are the stories that support us, that connect us. And to me, while I have a connection to the stories like rabbit stories or conejo or folk stories, I have even more connections to those things that that families tell around when we get together around the fire or around the food.
Wonderful, wonderful. I always remember that line from Gabriel Garcia Marquez. There are three kinds of stories. There's the private stories, the public stories, and the secrets.
Oh,
I love that line. The secrets. Okay, another question.
yes.
What message do you have to readers, both children and adults, about the power of reading and access to books at this time of book banning?
Oof.
Oof. Good question.
It is a good question. I think that at this point, we are all going to have to fight for our books, really. And it will be very difficult to put that responsibility on children. Well, I believe that children have their own books inside of them, that they carry their books, that children that don't have books, like here in Mexico, there are a lot of children that don't have a book in their lives. And we can always, as adults, help them realize that maybe if there is no money to go and buy a book, that there is a book that they can always create. And that's something that I love that we can do. At the same time, I think that we adults, and here, all of us here, have a big responsibility into making sure that these books are available for children. We cannot put that responsibility on children alone. So we are going to have to fight like warriors for that. And we are going to have to keep looking for those voices that are being erased, the voices that are being put aside, invisibilized, taken out of the shelves. All of us are going to have to bring those voices back and put them in their place. And also the ones that, you know, they are still waiting at the table of the editors because they haven't found a way yet to become a published book that can be in the hands of other children. We are going to have to look really hard to those stories and realize why we are not publishing some of those stories. I know that there are stories that maybe they still need work and they need more craft, but also as guardians of the books and the stories, we are going to have to look harder and use different lenses to look at stories that perhaps we don't understand yet.
Right, right. All right, next question. We see your room and it's filled with beautiful instruments on your walls, and you played for us. When you were creating your art, do you listen to music? And if so, what kind of music do you listen to?
Yeah, I do listen to music constantly. Unless I'm writing, then it becomes a little harder if the music had words. I like the music like the one I played before with my jarana, which is son jarocho, and it's a music here from the state of Veracruz. It is music that comes from the coast. It comes from the country. And now in the last 30 years, it has become something that young people play. It is a way to have our voices heard. It is a way to tell the things that we feel, the things that we need. This music, for instance, usually the songs are old, And nowadays, new verses are being created with a view of our world that is more recent, that sometimes is more like even feminist and more in ways that we really want to live. And I like to listen to that music, and when I can, I like to play it and even make some songs as well.
Great. Well, we're getting some questions on the screen here. Here's one from the wonderful Sam Bloom. Hello, Sam.
Hi,
Are there any types of books you want to make that you haven't already made? For example, nonfiction, graphic novels, whatever.
I have been making a graphic novel for years and years, and like I mentioned before, comic books is one of my first loves, and graphic novels now, they are one of the things that I love the most. I love reading them. I love seeing them. I love seeing what some people are making with graphic novels. And I still believe that I'm going to be making them. And that's one of the things that I'm looking forward to. I'm also looking forward to using text combined with images, but in formats that might be for older readers as well. But I'm still together with images, because images are very important to me. Yeah.
Well, here's another question. Speaking of images, how do the images of strife or war that are so around us all the time today affect your work and you?
Well, I'm sure that they affect us, but I like to think that they also inspire me. I mean, not the images of war, not the images of violence, not those, but the images that changing that violence and changing that war, the images that come to us so that we can undo the damage that violence is doing. So I think that right now we have this opportunity to come up with stories, with images, and with work that responds to the need that we have to heal from the pain and the hurt that violence brings to us. And while it would be ideal not needing that hurt in order to create those images, at least let's take this opportunity to come up with the stories and the books and the images that are going to counteract the violence that we are living right now.
Mm-hmm. Here's another question we have. How do you maintain community these days when we are still so separated by COVID?
You're right. And that was something that when COVID hit and I was making a book at the beginning, I didn't realize how separate I was from other people, because that's usually what happens when I'm immersed in making images for a book. I was making the images for Bright Star and Lucero. And when I was done with the book, I tried to come outside, and I realized that it was not easy. I couldn't go and visit the people I love. I couldn't go to the places where I play music. I couldn't do any of those connections. And fortunately, things are changing, and especially here in Mexico, we are using our resources. We are still using cubrebocas. We are still using, masks, especially when we go indoors with other people that we don't know, or when we go to stores, so that we can have and continue those connections with the people that we love. So I think that we are going to have to just take some measurements and do the things that we need to do so that we can have the prize, we can have that, of being able to connect with other people. And I think that doing things virtually like we are doing it right now, well, might be what we have left in order to all of us be safe and healthy, it is also an opportunity to connect in ways that we have not done before. For instance, now we are all here together in this space, hearing to the lecture, while in another moment, only if we travel all the way to where you are, we will have been able to be present. And right now, we are all present here, and that's something that we can be grateful for.
Yeah. You realize how precious things are through this, you know? So much of your discussion talked about immigrants. And one of the things that this is my question, okay? Yeah. So Hazel Rockman, who was a member of this committee for years and years and years, is from South Africa. And she was forced to leave South Africa because of her and Jaime, her husband's, political positions. She wrote a book in 1993 called Against Borders, Promoting Books for a Multicultural World. And 30 years ago, she said this: reading makes immigrants of us all. It takes us away from home, but more important, it finds homes for us everywhere. Would you love the thought that reading makes immigrants of us all, and then reading finds homes for all of us everywhere? What does reading mean to you? And what questions do they answer for you personally?
Wow. Reading means to me a way of processing the world and the way that I want to live. Reading, and I always think about how it is for children. I think it is for me like that too, that we all experience life when we read. We have an opportunity to practice. We can practice at making mistakes. We can practice at doing things in different ways. We can practice at being fearful or entering spaces that we didn't think of entering before. We do practice life when we read. And hopefully when we read and as we had the opportunities to practice doing things that otherwise we would not do, hopefully we want to stop there. Hopefully that will be the door that when we put the book outside or aside, then we are ready to open the doors that are here in real life to go and do those things that we already practiced when we were reading. Reading is marvelous, and it does take us to other places. But hopefully it also takes us in real life in ways that we can connect to each other. And I was thinking about what you were mentioning this about your friend and how about immigration, and I was remembering that we usually refer to migration or to immigration as something that seems to happen because people want to migrate. What we need to remember is that migrations that happen are forced migrations. If people are going to other place because they want to open up to the world outside, well, perhaps that will be more like visiting. And hopefully one day when we move to another place, it will be so that we can be surprised, so that we can get to see other places that we didn't know before. And that we are not immigrating because we are being forced to immigrate. So hopefully that will be the case one day.
Yeah. So I had asked you earlier to think about what 3 books, either adult or children's books, you recommend to our audience as our last question tonight. So if you don't mind answering that.
Yeah, well, it was hard for me to choose only 3 books because there are so many wonderful books that are being made right now. And I wanted to bring also all kinds of books, but I decided to bring these 3 books. This one is in Espanol, but it's a book that is also published in English, and in English is called Run Little Chasqui. And this is a story written by Mariana Llanos and illustrated by Mariana Ruiz Johnson. And what it does, it brings us into seeing the journey of little Chasqui and how he has to bring a very special object to the king. And this, all of what we see is a journey of bravery. It is a journey of connection with the environment and the animals and other people. And it is told with language, and what I mean language, I don't mean like a Spanish language, but the pictures and the situations that are depicted in this book are are part of the Peruvian and Bolivian culture and the Inca culture, because actually this is Una aventura en el mundo Inca, an adventure in the Inca world. I love that story. It's simple. There is action, and children, when I read it, they always love just see what little Chasqui, whether he's gonna get there on time or not. Another book that I might not need to recommend, but I still gonna offer is Vamos, Let's Cross the Bridge by Raúl III. Almost any book that Raúl III is making right now is something that is worth looking at, because the worlds that he offers are full of stories. And at the beginning, they might look to you like, oh, this looks so familiar to me, or I don't know if I can look at so many things that are in here. But if you stay with the book and look close, you will see that these books are so rich, and they are funny. They tell stories inside stories. And for some people, like for example, for me and for some children, these stories are familiar, and they are finally showing the things that we people, Latinx people, Mexican people do when we cross bridges. And the last one is Where Wonder Grows by Selena Gonzalez and Adriana M. Garcia. This book is one of those books that I always think, I wish that everybody could read a book like this. This is about stones. It is about the power of stones. It is about how stones are related to time, to space, to fire, to water, to earth. And there is this talk about the ancient and the teachings that stones bring us. It also has a scene that talks about one of my favorite spaces in the world, which is the Temazcal. The Temazcal is a little hut or an earth encasing that is made on the earth, and it's usually made with clay. Sometimes it's made with other materials, but inside, people bring rocks that are put in the fire. The rocks are first put in the fire, and when they are red, these rocks are brought inside this the Temazcal, and we go there to have ceremonies. My mother tells me that when I was born and when I was little, she brought me to a Temazcal, which is like the sweat lodge that you might be more familiar with. And that's a way of receiving children. It is a way of healing women. And this book talks about Temazcal and the rocks and how they are our ancestors and our grandmothers and grandfathers. So I love this book. I hope that you love it too.
Thank you for your passion. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for everything. It's been so, so delightful tonight. I can't thank you. Thank you enough. Now, as we're leaving, I would like to end this presentation by thanking Alexa Hamilton and Kate Eckert for so beautifully managed the technical aspect of this webinar from Chicago Public Library. And finally, on behalf of the Sutherland Committee, the University of Chicago Laboratory Schools, the Chicago Public Library, we'd like to thank you for joining us this year. We look forward to seeing you, hopefully next year in person, but perhaps not. When our speaker will be Zeta Elliott at 7:30 on May 5th, 2023. She will be our 40th Zena Sutherland Lecturer. So good night to each of you and stay safe. Thank you so much, Juji.
Thank
Bye-bye
you
now.
and good night, everybody. Thank you for all of you who were here and wrote to me, and mi corazón para ustedes. Thank you.
Bye-bye now.